Welcome to part 2 of my tours of the great cloister of Canterbury Cathedral, dealing with Bay 10, which was constructed by my estimation between May and June 1410, using arms collected between December 1409 and May 1410. Bay 10 occupies an important position both geographically, as it sits above the principal modern entrance to the cloister, close to the great west door of the cathedral, and in terms of the whole story of the cloister, as it was the first fully heraldic bay to be completed. The construction of Bay 10 was a change in direction of the building works, which up to that time had been in an anti-clockwise direction. It was the last bay of the south walk to be completed. The anti-clockwise build stopped at Bay 35 of the east walk because around December 1409 or January 1410 the Archbishop had decided that the remainder of the cloister vault was to be made as a roll of arms, for two reasons. Firstly, because it was a great idea, and secondly, because it could be used to generate much needed revenue. He began to conceive the cloister as a roll of arms, and he wanted to devise a very special scheme outside the three bays in front of the chapter house, bays 32 to 34. This was going to take long planning and careful consideration. Bay 10 has a predominantly Kentish flavour, and the Archbishop's register shows him to have been resident in Kent in late December 1409 and for most of January 1410 at Maidstone, Canterbury and Queenborough Castle. Thereafter he divided his time between Kent and London. He was back in residence at his Canterbury Palace in May. The first thing to note is the presence of his arms of Fitzalan quartering Warren and impaling the Diocese of Canterbury, both on the central boss and on the wall side. In the second instance it sits in between the arms of his predecessor Archbishop Courtenay and the lapdog arms of Courtenay's predecessor Archbishop Sudbury, who was decapitated during the Peasants' Revolt of 1381. These two predecessors had both made large personal donations to the building works. Over the doorway we have the attributed, i.e. invented arms of three saints, Thomas Becket, flanked by the two ancient saints of England, St. Edward and St. Edmund. Immediately adjacent to Becket, by a curious unforeseen symmetry, we have the arms of a fourth saint, Pope John Paul II, canonised in 2014. The arms were placed here to commemorate his visit to the cathedral on the 29th of May 1982, in the company of Archbishop Robert Runcie and Prince Charles. The Bishop of Rome and the Archbishop together knelt in prayer at the site of Becket's martyrdom. The papal arms with their distinctive letter M for Mary replaced a lost shield originally that had the Northumberland family of Hodgson. Two shields away from it, the arms impaling the Diocese of Canterbury are those of Robert Runcie, in place of a shield, the details of which have been entirely lost. And next to this are the arms of Prince of Wales, replacing the lost arms of Etchingham impaling Battisford, of which more shortly. Returning our attention now to the central boss, following the line of the central axis in the direction of the martyrdom, we come to the arms of Lord Ferrers of Groby, gules, 7 mascals or, and not, as they are now painted, argent, 7 mascals jewels for Braybrook. The mother of William Lord Ferrers was a Beaumont, making him a kinsman of the Archbishop, and you can probably spot the arms of the Archbishop's Beaumont cousins of a lion on a field of fleur-de-lis close by. The quarterly shield adjacent to the Archbishop's in the direction of the West Walk is that of Richard de Vere, Earl of Oxford, who had spent much of his minority in wardship to the Archbishop's sister, Joan de Bohun. Let us now consider the remaining shields in groups. I am going to refer to the shields by number from this point on, using my reconstruction of the bay as I believe it once appeared. At 4, 10 and 14 there is a group of 3 shields relating to the Kentish family of Isaac. What is most curious about them is that they have all been reversed, so that the bend has become a bend sinister, and a sinister quarter has become a canton. I believe that the reason for this reversal was an idea that the Archbishop had to distinguish female donors from their husbands, of which there are 4 examples in bays 10 and 11, after which the idea was dropped in favour of an alternative scheme. The Archbishop clearly did not espouse a male chauvinist approach to heraldry. At number 14 are the 3 Talbots' heads of Hall of Dover impaling Isaac, reversed for Isabel, born Isaac, the widow of John Hall, who died in 1409. Isaac at number 4 is for Agnes, born Grubb, the widow of John Isaac of Bridge, while Isaac at number 10 is for the widow of John Isaac of Kent and Devon. The years of death of the 2 John Isaacs are not recorded, but neither man was known to be still living when Bay 10 was constructed. On another point of interest, the families of Isaac and Grubb were moneylenders who were almost certainly Christianized Jews. The use of the leopard's face on the arms of Isaac is noteworthy because from the reign of Edward I this had been the assay mark for sterling silver. There are 3 shields at 8, 18 and 36 for the family grouping of the Kent-Sussex families of Brenchersley, Battisford and Etchingham. The arms of Battisford appear in Bay 35, which was the previous bay to be constructed, and this grouping follows on from it, sponsored by 2 of the daughters of Margaret Battisford, who died in 1406. At number 18, as we see here on the left, are the rather striking arms azure across potent engrailed or for Brenchersley. Joan Battisford husband, Sir William Brenchersley, died in 1406 and was buried in the cathedral nave. There is an impalement for Brenchersley and Battisford at number 8, which we see in the centre, while at number 36 here on the right, now replaced by Prince Charles, was probably Etchingham impaling Battisford for Alice Battisford and her husband William Etchingham. There are the arms of 2 abbeys. At number 11 is Battle Abbey, Sussex. It has a red cross on a silver background for St. Martin, a Roman military saint who was accorded the same arms as St. George. Around the cross are 2 swords and 2 crowns, a representation of the Battle of Hastings, on the site of which the abbey was founded. At number 12 we have the arms of Lesnes Abbey in Kent, and next to them at number 19 the arms of the Kentish family of Lucy. The Archbishop had a special regard for the Kentish Lucy family because Richard de Lucy, the justiciar of Henry II, had atoned in 1178 for his role in the death of Thomas Becket by founding Lesnes. A version of the Lucy arms is to be seen on the Archbishop's episcopal seal in a tableau of the murder of Becket. The field of the Lucy arms has been incorrectly repainted as azure. It should be gules. These are canting arms, the fish being known as lucies, a type of pike. At number 5 are the arms of Hells of Kent, descended from Thomas Becket's sister Agnes. They held land from the Archbishop by knight service, and like various others belonging to this elite group, they had the fur ermine as a prominent feature of their arms. I speculate that at some stage the group wore ermine-trimmed robes on ceremonial occasions. At number 23, the Kentish family of Ainsford originally had the same feudal relationship to the Archbishop. They bore jewels fretty ermine, while the first shield encountered in Bay 29, which you can just see on the right side of this picture, is John Fremingham of Kent, who also held from the Archbishop by knight service, and who also had an ermine field to his arms. Looking now at the cluster of shields which lie in the direction of the East Walk, at number 38 are the arms of Master John Kington, who was clothed as a monk at the Cathedral Priory before the Archbishop on the 21st of March 1410, having served a distinguished career serving the Crown on various embassies to the German-speaking world. Some of his diplomatic correspondence is preserved in the Cathedral archive. His arms with the 3 crowns in chief resemble those of the town of Kingston upon Hull, from which it is likely that he came, but they are also similar to those of the Cathedral of Cologne, with its 3 kings, which he had likely visited. Once adjacent at number 34 and now lost was a swan rising for Swan of Southfleet and Sandwich in Kent, while at 33 are the canting arms of a squirrel for Squire of Westerham in Kent. From this family came Robert Squire, who became master of the Painters' Company in 1433 and left his London mansion to the Cathedral Priory. At 40 we find the arms argent semi of fleur-de-lis azure for Nicholas Pottin of Rochester in Kent. The Archbishop knew him and acted as his executor in 1404. Pottin was probably descended from the ancient Kentish family of Peyfera, who bore argent semi of Lee sable. Nicholas's daughter Juliana married a member of the Cobham family belonging to the Rundale or Randall branch, the shield of which is adjacent at 41, where we have the arms of Reginald Lord Cobham of Rundale in Shorn in Kent. He died in 1405, leaving an 8-year-old son, and the donor was presumably his widow Elizabeth, daughter of John Savage of Bobbing in Kent. The three remaining Kentish shields are those of Joan Lady Foxley at 16, who held the manor of Apulderfield in Kent in her widowhood, and John Moonins of Dover at 6, who moved to Canterbury and was elected as an honorary freeman there in 1409. The three crescents of his arms are presumably intended as a canting for 3 moons, although the colours are wrong, as the appropriate colours were no longer available. At 22, the 5 eagles displayed on a cross are for John Digg, who served as Sheriff of Kent in 1401, was a Deputy Lord Warden of the Cinque Ports, and who held land from Christchurch, i.e. from the Cathedral. The Quintin family, with now lost arms at 40, were linked to Kent through their overlords, the Lords Cobham of Cobham. The assemblage of arms not linked to Kent is small. I have already mentioned Hodgson of Northumberland. Another presence from that county is at 15 for Robert Harbottle, with his arms charged with 3 flies, presumably intended to be blue bottles. Indeed, the family later changed this to actual bottles. Harbottle was a king's esquire of Henry IV and would have encountered the Archbishop at court. At 42 is sable 3 bells argent for William Porter, who was another king's esquire of Henry IV and an esquire of the body of the Prince of Wales. The bells allude to the office of Castle Porter, and the family could trace this occupation back to Normandy in the 12th century. At 9, the chevron between 3 cups is for either Roger Cavendish of Ipswich, who died circa 1408, and whose son-in-law was keeper of the King's Great Wardrobe, or his brother John Cavendish, who worked for the Crown as a broiderer, that is, as an embroiderer. Both brothers apparently bore the same arms. The family took its name from Cavendish in Suffolk, and likely shared a common descent with the Cavendish family, who were the ancestors of the Dukes of Devonshire, who by this period were using the arms sable 3 stags' heads argent. At 26, the chevron between 3 rooks is for Sir Thomas Rooksby of Yorkshire, a King's Knight of Henry IV, who defeated and killed the King's enemy Henry Percy, Earl of Northumberland, at the Battle of Bramham Moor in 1408. At 27 was once argent across engrailed gules, quartering the chequy arms of Morduit for Ralph Green of Drayton in Northamptonshire. The arms with a cross were disputed with Sir John Dallingridge, whose arms are also in the Cloister. This dispute began in 1405, but some compromise was evidently reached, and both men continued to use the arms. It is of interest that Green's father had been one of Henry IV's most bitter adversaries. At 32 are yet more canting arms, a chevron between 3 Talbot dogs for William Talbot of Devon, whose wife Eleanor Peveril was a kinswoman of the Archbishop. Finally, at 37 are the arms of Catherine Engane, widow of the last Lord Engane, and she died on the last day of the 14th century. She was the sister of Archbishop Courtenay and therefore a kinswoman of Archbishop Arundel, and presumably made a donation to the cathedral building works prior to her death. since the Archbishop seems to have been disinclined to include his friends and relations unless they made a donation. Thus we can see that almost every individual in Bay 10 had an obvious point of contact with the Archbishop, even if it was only through him having been a habitué of the court and a close personal friend of the king.